Okay, everyone, hello. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. Welcome to our Black Women's Equal Pay Day panel discussion. I'm first partner Jennifer Siebel Newsom, and I am joined today by three incredibly inspirational and fearless leaders. California Commission on the Status of Women and Girls Commissioner and dear friend, Senator Holly J. Mitchell. Yay! PolicyLink founder and president, Angela Glover-Blackwell. Yay! And TaskRabbit CEO, Stacy Brown-Phipot. Yay! Again, we are here to have a conversation focused on advocacy, allyship, and structural change to bring and build true equity for Black women in California as we navigate the COVID-19 crisis, recovery, and beyond. Last year, I actually launched Equal Pay Day CA in partnership with the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls to turn the strongest equal pay laws in the nation into the smallest pay gap in the nation. And through a combination of education, implementation, and enforcement, we're making sure that every woman in California gets her fair due. Since Equal Pay CA's launch in April of 2019, we've connected thousands of Californians to our equal pay resources, hosted roundtables and conversations to hear firsthand about the pay gap's impact on working women and their families, and secured more than 50 major corporate commitments to our Equal Pay Pledge, reaching hundreds of thousands of employees. So I think we can all agree that there's never been a more important time than to continue to push for gender equity, especially as women of color bear the brunt of the COVID-19 crisis. So I'm thankful to all of you who have joined us here today, and I can't wait to hear from these amazing women that I'm able to share the virtual stage with. So let's get right to it. And I'm actually not even getting to really share your bios because we're gonna get right into the conversation, and I'm actually gonna start with a little bit of an icebreaker where I want each of you to share your personal stories, but in a really condensed way. Each of you uses your voices for what you believe in such different but equally important ways. And I would love for you to start by having each of you tell us how you found your voice and your power. Angela, do you want to start?
I made a little sound, so it comes to me. Yes, I will start.
Thank you.
No question that I began to find my voice in church. Sunday school, they had a children's day every year and we participated, and I remember how nervous I was, but we did it all the time, so I got used to it. But where I really found my voice was in high school. It was in a public speaking class, and the assignment was to give a speech to the class about how to do something. Well, I didn't know how to do anything. And I remember the kids, somebody would talk about how to make an apron, how to cook something. I didn't do any of that. And I kept going back and forth. So finally, I got fascinated with the process of making a decision. And I decided to give my speech on how to make a decision. And so I did. And at the end of it, I recited the Robert Frost poem, Two Roads Diverge in a Yellow Wood. And I looked over and the teacher was wiping away a tear and the students were just sitting there with their mouths open. And then finally they started cheering and I thought, well, maybe I can do something.
I love that. That's great. That's great. Holly, what about you?
So if you can see behind me is the three panels of black and white pictures, and those are family members. And right in the middle is Holly Blanks, who was my father's grandmother. The picture's taken in the late 1890s in Mississippi. She too was 6 feet tall and was a nurse midwife. And when I learned the story of the source of my name and why my father chose to name me after her, he talked about going to visit grandmother Holly, and she was the only Black woman in town that didn't have to step to the side on the sidewalk when white men passed her by. That he was so impressed because she had her own horse and buggy. That was a big deal. And so it was clear as I would see his eyes light up talking about his grandmother, that those attributes and that power she yielded meant something to him. As a man who served in the segregated armed services in the Second World War, as he would say, who dealt with that all of his life, his grandmother Holly had power. And I realized that I had a responsibility to carry her name. I share her stature. And I think that was one of the early kind of inklings that I had a responsibility to have a voice and to use it.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Stacy, how about you?
Yeah, so while I grew up in Detroit in a household of strong, independent Black women, my mom was a single mom who raised us to help take care of us while she worked, and while she was with us, my great-grandmother also lived with us. And each of those women always reinforced the importance of having a strong voice. And I promise Angela and I did not practice this, but the first time I had to really use my voice was in 7th grade. We had to recite a poem, and I was terrified of public speaking. And so we had to memorize a poem that meant something to us and recite it in front of the class. And so I chose Langston Hughes' Mother to Son. And it starts with, "Well, honey, life for me ain't been no crystal stair." And I looked at my mom and I realized for her life was not a crystal stair, but she was climbing and she was going and she was doing. So I gave this speech. I took a deep breath and just gave this speech in front of my class and got like a standing ovation. And it was like the only one I've ever gotten so far. I'm waiting on the next one, but that one came, and it just taught me that if you speak from a place of passion and love, then that's where your voice really is.
That's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you all. Gorgeous stories. Super inspiring. So let's start with the problem that we're talking about today. We're here today to raise awareness about the pay gap for Black women. Nationally, Black women only make 62 cents on the dollar compared to white men, and that is with pre-pandemic data. We know that COVID-19 is disproportionately impacting women, and particularly women of color. But we also know that even these statistics only tell one part of the story in terms of the wealth gap in this country and the larger history of discrimination faced by Black women in particular. Angela, I'd love to start with you. And we spoke about this in our documentary, The Great American Lie. But can you tell us a little bit more about how we got here with regards to wealth and income inequality and how that has worsened the situation for Black women and their families today?
It is so important during this moment when the nation is having an awakening around race to make sure that we all go back to the beginning, that how we got here started before the nation was even founded. This is a nation that was founded on genocide, stolen land, human bondage, enslaved labor. And no matter how much we would like to forget about that and start now afresh and try to do the right thing going forward, we won't be able to do the right thing until we both face that history, understand and understand how it continues to operate. When we talk about where we are now, we are at a place which is really extraordinary when you think about what we have been up against as Black women, as Black people. And what happens to Black women and Black people happens to everybody who is in a position of being targeted, being exploited, being oppressed. In many ways in this nation, while we can talk about what's happening with Latinx women, we can talk about what's happening with Indigenous women, we can talk about what's happening with Hmong and other women who are suffering. Anybody who is oppressed in this society falls into the chasm that's defined by the Black-white paradigm because of the extraordinary dysfunction and abnormality of the living relationship between Black and white people during slavery. It actually caused a deepening of a narrative about a hierarchy of human value in this nation, and that narrative is running in the back of the mind of the nation continuously. So when we look at the pay gap, when we look at the wealth gap, and we look at what Black women are having to experience as they try to make a living, raise a family, and move forward, they have always had to start from a deep hole. Because when you work for hundreds of years and you don't get paid, you are starting at zero. When you can't buy a home, when you can't find money to invest in your small business, and our entrepreneurial spirit is extraordinary, 3 times as likely to start a business as a white woman, and yet so hard to get the resources to be able to do it. So generation after generation, we start at zero. And we start at zero against a system that does not want to make a space for us. It always comes reluctantly. It always comes with a little less. And it always has you constantly feeling insecure as you try to move forward. What happens to Black women is the litmus test for America, and America is failing it. And we just hope that in this awakening moment, we can begin to get on the same page in terms of where we come and move forward.
I'm going to ask each of you a question. We can circle back around because I want to talk about solutions, obviously, in the end. So thank you so much, Angela. So as first partner, I'm really focused on uplifting issues and policies that support families and working mothers in their dual role as caregiver and breadwinner. And Senator Mitchell, I know that these issues are of utmost importance to you. Black moms are more likely to participate in the workforce than moms of any other race. And about 85% of Black mothers are the primary sole or co-breadwinner in their families. In 2017, these mothers were making only 54 cents compared to the white dad's dollar. So what can be done to ensure that Black mothers in particular are supported during COVID-19 so they keep taking care of their families and moving forward in their careers?
I appreciate your partnership with the Commission First Partner. On behalf of our brand new Executive Director, LaKenya Jordan, we really thank you for the partnership. And you know, the reality is being Black and female is a pre-existing condition. And so a lot of the things I'm going to talk about existed before COVID, and just, you know, COVID has just exacerbated the Black female experience. I was on a webinar a couple of weeks ago with Angela Davis that was convened by the Black Women's Health Imperative. And Angela said, Black women's health is foundational to our democracy. And when I listened to that, I thought it's so true. Our health, our physical health, our mental health, our economic health, you know, if we fix it for us, for those who think, why is the first partner talking about this today? What does that have to do with the rest of us? If you fix it for Black women, all boats will rise. And so it is so important when we look at our history to recognize, even in government, that there are structural barriers to our ability to soar and be well. We artificially capped the CalWORKS reimbursement for decades. You know, a government-sponsored program that is designed to keep children out of deep poverty. And all we have done is continue to keep Black children in deep poverty by not investing appropriately in that program. You know, when you look at the jobs in which many Black women find themselves, that of caregiver, in-home support services or childcare, you know, they don't qualify for unemployment insurance. And so as those were many, while they're essential workers, and in many instances had to not work for a while because of our shutdown, many of the government-sponsored programs to help them keep afloat, they don't qualify for. Recognizing that we don't value many of the fields that Black women find themselves working in, as in the caregiving fields, educational fields, and why historically those have not been professions that we honor and sponsor. I think there are so many, at the federal level, this bailout with the Paycheck Protection Plan, Ms. Glover talked about, you know, Black women are entrepreneurial and will open our own businesses, and yet that's the category of women that didn't benefit from that federal bailout. And so we still have even government-sponsored programs that disproportionately negatively impact us, that don't help us at the same rate that they help other women. Not to mention health disparities and access to the number of Black women who live in food deserts, having access to health services and mental health services in our own community, affordable housing, and the generations of redlining we experience. All of those issues have a disproportionate impact on us that create this pre-existing condition that was further complicated when we all experienced this public health and economic pandemic.
Stacy, you're one of the very few Black executives in Silicon Valley, and I would love for you to share with us how race has shaped your professional experience with the hurdles you've had to overcome, and how we can get more Black women in seats of power on corporate boards and in leadership more broadly.
Yeah, thank you. It's unfortunate that I am one of the few. in 2015, 57% of all professional occupations were held by women, but only 25% were those in computing, and the numbers haven't moved that much. It's even lower for women of color, just 1% and 3% for Black women, respectively. So the numbers look really bad.
Mm-hmm.
Compared to women overall, Black women are promoted more slowly, receive less support from managers, get less access to senior leaders, and face a greater variety of microaggressions than any other person in the workforce. For example, and many of you may resonate with this, Black women are 3 times more likely than white men and 2.5 times more likely than white women to hear a coworker express surprise about their language skills or their other abilities. That's a microaggression. One of the things that I've struggled with, in addition to that, early on in my career and even now, was just joining a company that's built on referrals. Meaning you hire people, and this happens all the time in tech because we're growing our businesses so fast. We hire people based on our networks. So if you don't have a diverse network, then you're not going to hire diverse people. At TaskRabbit, we've been fortunate to bring diversity into the company. 60% of our leadership team are female, 48% identify as Hispanic, African American, or another race, 16% a diverse slate of candidates for both hiring and for promotions. And then once hired, we need to feel as Black women included. And we'll talk a little bit later about some of these things. The last thing I'll say is that as Black women in leadership positions, it's really important the role that we play. In particular, every time I think about something I'm doing, every decision I'm making, I think about the impact that I have on the community. I'm an active member in the new director selection process for the public company boards that I'm on. I'm on the board of HP and on Nordstrom, where we're proud to have more than one Black person, and on Nordstrom, 3 Black women on that board. And I'm raising 2 daughters, 2 little Black girls who will become women of color. And so a lot of our work will start at home.
That's great. Holly, similarly for you, how did you overcome different obstacles in your path, and how can we help the next generation of Black women legislative leaders rise up and take the mantle?
Oh, I appreciate that. And I don't know that I've overcome them, because I think I encounter them, on a consistent basis. That's why I am active in the Black Caucus. I'm active in the Women's Caucus. That's why I introduced SB 188, the Crown Act, to allow myself, with my own natural hair, access to the workplace. But I think we have to encourage and support women to run. I served as a faculty in residence decades ago at the Center for the American Woman in Politics at Rutgers University in New Jersey. And their research always has shown that, women have to be asked multiple times and encouraged to run before we do it. We often start in areas, local government, where we have a direct connection. You have kids, you have an issue at the school, you have some concerns, you run for school board. And so I think that we have to encourage women to run. When Black women step up and say that they have an interest and they want to, we have to open up our checkbooks and have our hand on their back. So as we are seeing now at the national level, once the Democratic nominee elect, whatever his appropriate title would be, since we're not haven't had the convention yet, declared who he was going to select as his VP running mate, social media and even mainstream media erupted in challenging her, her ability. Can she withstand the test? Is she appropriate? All those kinds of questions that are rarely asked of my male counterparts, those who are elected or those who are candidates. And so we've got to encourage Black women to run and create space. I am so proud to have been mentored by Black women elected officials and do my part every day. I've had 2 women of color who were on staff with me, who ran for office and are elected officials themselves, So Black women in these seats of power have to make room for the next one. And as Diane Watson famously says, we have to reach back as we climb. And then all of us need to value the role Black women play as voters, as activists, as policymakers, and continue to push them and give them opportunity. It starts not only with many of the mentoring programs where we look at very young women, although they need it, when you consider the number of Black girls that are disproportionately suspended from school every day in this country. But it deals with women through the, through the ages and stages, looking creatively at places where Black women are. So I love the fact that the Women's Foundation of California has the Women's Policy Institute. And there are places like that program and LawPAC and others where we're finding women working who are leaders where they are, exposing them to the state policy-making process and planting that little seed. We always try to have an event with WPI in the Capitol. I have the women on the Senate floor. I said, sit in these seats. This is your building, it belongs to you. Because I think if you can see yourself in that space, then you understand that you too have the opportunity to be there and serve your public with your own lens, your own real life experience as a Black woman, that there is value in our perspective and our experiences in policy-making bodies across this country.
Beautiful, thank you. Angela, I'm gonna start with you on this next question. Holly spoke to it a little bit earlier, but so one factor of the wage gap that's hard for folks to quantify is job segregation. So women, especially women of color, as Holly shared, are working in industries and jobs that pay less than industries dominated by men. So as COVID-19 has shown us, I'm sorry to keep referring to it, but I feel like it's clearly setting us back even further. The jobs that are typically devalued and underpaid are in fact essential, right? They're the nurses, the childcare workers, the teachers, the grocery store clerks, and these are the jobs that keep our society going. Why do you think we have such a hard time valuing these workers and these industries, and what do we need to do to fix it?
We really need to fix it. And we have had no momentum to fix it before right now. One of the things that COVID-19 has shown everybody is that if our frontline and essential workers cannot go to work, America cannot go to work. And that connection had not been made before. Never before have we had greater examples about our interconnectedness. And those jobs, those essential jobs, those frontline worker jobs, they have been undervalued because women of color occupy them. And they are occupied by women of color because they are undervalued. I mean, it is the place that you can get in. It is the job that you can get. And we have this hierarchy of human value, and I'm going to keep returning to it because it's a hard thing to have to face. But when you value people less, you assume that what they're making is enough. You assume that the schools the kids go to are good enough. You assume that their businesses are never going to amount to anything anyway, so why give it any money? And so this ability to just devalue people allows for not only for Black and Latinx women to be in these jobs, but as a society, as our economy changes and more people who never thought that they were going to be at the bottom of the economic rung, who were white, find themselves slipping into the insecurity of this part of the economy, we see that it hurts us all to be there. And so there's a lot of discrimination that takes place that causes it. There's a lot of, in terms of where you live and who you know and what your natural job network is, and all of those things have to do with what job you get, because people are segregated in terms of that's what they happen to find out about. And then when they get in, they realize that getting into the front door had no expectation that you would climb up to the highest position. There are no ladders, there's no education, there's no mentoring, there's no assumption. So all of those things are wrong, but we can fix it now that we as a nation are waking up to our interconnectedness. I always like to make the moral argument for inclusion and fairness and justice, but I don't like to depend on it because I have not found that the country's track record of being a moral nation is strong enough for me to depend on that. So in addition to always bringing the moral argument, I like to talk about the economic argument. It's clear that if people of color, women of color who are raising families, if they don't become the middle class, there won't be one. If we don't figure out how to tap the innovation of the youngest part of the population that's raising families, buying homes, building community, our communities will not be vibrant. And so there is an economic reason now why this country has got to get it right. And when you say you want to increase diversity within any company, if you ask, well, where do I find the people to invest? Look at the frontline workers. Just go right there and you will find a concentration of women of color, and you can start pulling and supporting and helping them to move forward.
Awesome. Thank you. Holly, do you want to add anything more? I know you were talking about this earlier. Anything to complement what Angela was just sharing with us?
No, I thought her comment was brilliant in terms of why these are industries that attract women of color and why women of color work in those industries, because they're industries that are undervalued. You know, it's interesting, it plays out in the policymaking arena as well. When you look at the composition of the committees of the caring industries, health, human services, education. Myself, I'm classic examples. You know, I gravitated to the budget committee because I wanted to make sure that I could bring my life experience and represent the needs of working class women and women of color in the budget making arena. And so I completely agree. Until we fix it, we haven't fixed really the economic engine that drives our country. You know, poor people are consumers. And so the more we earn, the more we spend, and we turn it over, and it helps our economic recovery. And so just being clear about that and why it makes sense to elevate the boat that Black women are on makes sense to me. But like Angela said, we can't rely on the expectation that it's the right thing to do, which is why I'm in public office, why it's important that you're the first partner, so we can make sure that there are laws in place, so we can make sure that we increase the minimum wage, that we expand paid family leave, that we expand the earned income tax credit to include our sisters who are not citizens in this country, that we expand the CalWorks benefit to lift all boats.
Yes.
If I could add one thing to that, I've been really struck by how things would be different now if we had a federal job guarantee. All the things that we have been talking about could be addressed if the federal government guaranteed a job for everybody who wants one. We would not have people who are unemployed and want to be employed. We would not have people who are working at sub wages, because it would be a living wage job. And if you have living wage jobs that are provided by the government, then the private sector has to get in line, and they have to provide that as well. We also would avoid these cycles that we're in of unemployment. We could have a more reliable economy. And it's no coincidence that the first person to put forward the idea of a federal job guarantee was Sadie Alexander, a Black woman who got her PhD in economics in 1921. And when Roosevelt started talking about what we needed to do, she developed a fully blown federal job guarantee. The next person who really put it on the map was Coretta Scott King. So Black women have understood that it's going to take systemic change to be able to push this country into the place where we are tapping the extraordinary assets of all, including Black and Latinx and other women.
And if I could jump in, first of all, Stacy's in the waiting room and needs to be let back in. 15 people have texted me, so I want to make sure I said that on the record. Everybody's looking for Miss TaskRabbit. Let her back in, please. The other issue I would raise, in addition to Angela, is, you know, the minimum income. It has a name that I can't remember right now, that our wonderful mayor, Michael Tubbs of Stockton, is piloting in Stockton. Yes. The minimum income something. Somebody put it in chat, remind me. That is an amazing national model that could help Black women close the gap in the immediate.
Yes, yes, the
universal basic income.
Exactly. I'm not seeing Stacy. I'm going to keep going. And
she's on. She's there. I see.
Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Yes, I'm here.
Thank you, Stacy. Okay, so so this conversation, as we've been, you know, I've been throwing in here, comes at an unprecedented time, both in terms of the way COVID has upended our society, but also a renewed awareness about the other pandemic that exists in our country, which you're all very aware of, racism. And I want to know, do you feel hopeful with the renewed calls for racial justice across our country? And what do you think are the most important things that allies can do right now to support Black women in the fight for equality? Who wants to start? Holly, you want to start?
No, Miss Glover, because she's going to have the answer for all of us.
Okay.
I wanted to hear from Stacy. I hope she can get in here. I am hopeful. I am hopeful. I've seen a lot. I have been working on social change for more than 40 years. Started off as an organizer, been a public interest lawyer, community builder, foundation executive, policy advocate, lived across the country. I have never seen a moment like this. I have never seen a moment like this. The idea that we can tell the story of how it all started and people don't just let their eyes glaze over or ask who invited her in. People want to hear that story and they're paying attention. White people are really looking at themselves and they're looking at history and they're looking at what's happening around them and they're looking at what they don't know and thinking about what a small corner of the nation they've been living in and what to do about that. Corporate CEOs, elected officials, civic leaders, everybody is reaching out saying, help us do better. And people are putting their money where their mouth is. And this notion of an anti-racist movement, it's not just enough to say, I'm not racist. We have to have an anti-racist movement, become an anti-racist nation. And to harken back to what I said in the beginning, centering Blackness in all of this, understanding that it's what Holly Mitchell talked about when she said, it's not centering Blackness to exclude, but centering Blackness to understand with exquisite detail, how did we develop such a society that treats people like this so that no one has to suffer from that kind of treatment? All of that makes me think that this is a really, really special moment. I am hopeful. I have been disappointed in the past, and it won't kill me if I'm disappointed again. I will just get up and keep going forward. But I think we're going to take a great leap forward.
Yes, that's right. Thank you. Thank you so much. No, I agree 100%. Holly or Stacy, one of you.
Yeah, Stacy, you go.
Thank you. Lewis's documentary, Good Trouble, and it just stood out for me. Those words of getting into good trouble is exactly what we all need to do. I have to confess, I have felt a lot of anger, frustration, sadness, helplessness, all of that over the death of George Floyd and so many others. I have a brother. I remember my mother having those conversations with him about what to do if a police officer ever stopped him. And so I felt all of these things in the senseless killings, and it's coming up again, and it's come up again, and here we are. We're still here. And I've been frustrated. Because this feeling of being overwhelmed is felt by so many more people around the world. The emotions are heightened by so many people around the world. But what we must do, and the words of John Lewis, is to get into some good trouble. What does that mean? It means caring for each other. It means listening. It means asking questions. And it means acting. And that's the part, the acting part has always been the part that has been left off, because many of my friends have been silent supporters of me and quietly cheering me on and hugging me when I sat next to somebody on the plane who thought it was good for me that I was the CEO. And I need all of those women and men to stand up, speak up, and now act and do something and get into that good trouble.
Awesome. Thank you. Holly.
I agree with everything that's been said. And, it's about action. Ally, Madam First Partner, is a passive word. Accomplice means something. I want to know that someone is going to stand beside me, in front of me when it's necessary. I don't want to be the only one on the Senate floor to have to raise the issues that are obvious to me and the people I represent in the 30th Senate District. I want the entire legislature to understand the structural barriers to success Black women are experiencing in the blue state of California every day. I too have seen that amazing documentary, you know, filmed and produced by Black women, which makes it so rich, which has forced me, like many in America, to pull out books and be introduced to a whole new generation for me of Black feminist theorists. And so, you know, Moya Bailey, a professor at Northeastern University, coined this term a decade ago, misogynoir, the whole notion of anti-Black racist misogyny in the Black woman's experience. And so the fact that we can name it, the fact that it's not just something that I'm feeling alone in the pit of my stomach, not knowing if my colleagues understand, stood the power and the hurtfulness of their words or their lack of action, but the fact that we can name it, people are acknowledging it, it's being talked about consistently. And like Ms. Glover, I believe this time it will be sustained over time. When I think about the Watts Rebellion of '65, there were some amazing institutions that grew out of it. A hospital, a university, Cal State Dominguez Hills. If we had done what the report and the evaluation told us to do in '65, we wouldn't be in the position we are in today. So I hope that we are going to learn from history, learn from our current experience, and as Maya Angelou says, when you know better, do better. And that collectively, private sector, government, philanthropy, all of us in our own space and individuals are going to do different and do better and see me as a Black woman and acknowledge all that I have overcome to be your peer and colleague today. And we're going to make it better for the next generation. We have to.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. So Angela and Stacy, you both serve on the Governor's Economic Recovery Task Force, and Holly, you are a key leader in California's legislature. I'd love to hear your unique perspectives about what is the most important thing we need to do next to ensure that our economic recovery builds a more equitable society for everyone, but Black women and families at the center. What is the one thing, if we could only do one thing, what is the most important thing? Who wants to?
Want to go first?
Absolutely, I can go.
Okay.
I can go first. It's been an honor to serve on this task force and really be at the forefront of shaping the future of economic recovery for this state. There's the one thing that I'm drawn to is based on the company that I run, which is TaskRabbit. We connect self-employed people to customers, and we've been doing that since the 2008 financial crisis. When 2008 happened, TaskRabbit was founded and became a place where people could earn a meaningful income and set their own hourly rates, and in California happened to earn $38 an hour. And so what I'd like to see is this type of work continue to grow, continue to be a meaningful way that people earn and supplement income, even as people return to full-time work, and continue to be a safe way for them to do that. And the COVID crisis has highlighted one drawback to independent work, which is limited access to worker protections and benefits. And we've talked already about how that's disproportionately affecting Black women and other women of color. Mm-hmm. And so I'd like to see portable benefits and ways for us to provide worker protection and safety over economy next year, and the size of this market is over 300. This is a people economically return to some normalcy, but I really want to see us do it in a safe way by providing the best worker protection and benefits that we can.
Mm-hmm. Stacy, I didn't hear the last part. Did you all hear her? Was it just me that cut? That you
no, it was jumbled.
Okay.
It was.
Stacy, can you just the last few minutes there, can you just summarize just so everyone can hear you, because you're saying
the last part was really to make sure that as we recover Oh, that's my daughter, Zuri. She's getting her blanket. Here it is.
Beautiful. Perfect.
You heard?
I love it. So,
Again.
okay, shoot. We lost.
Independent workers with the best benefits that we can.
Okay, I think, yeah, Angela, it looks like you want to go ahead.
Sure. It's a hard question when you said one thing.
I know.
So I'm not going to cheat, but I'm going to wrap it up.
Okay.
That we need to make sure that we don't return to what we were. California should be the leader for the nation. This nation will truly shine when we show how a democracy and economy can work in the context of extraordinary difference. Here is California's opportunity to return to work in a way that is more respectful, more inclusive, where we actually pay attention to what we learned, that we are interconnected, and that we need to value everybody. We have adopted principles on the workforce, equity principles, and the first one is put people first. Put people first. And if we're going to apply it, everything that we do is going to have a slightly different cast to it, because it's going to show we're thinking about how to come back in a way that values frontline workers, that has them on a track of advancement, where we have everybody able to participate. We need to focus on young people coming out of high school, community college, into this economy will suffer for the rest of their lives if we don't take action now. They start late, they won't have career paths, they'll make family decisions about how many children to have, they'll even die earlier. We have a chance to say, let's really focus on young workers. So we need to create jobs, we need to open up jobs, we need to improve jobs, and we need to make sure that at every level, we're including young people so they don't suffer from this crisis for the rest of their lives.
Thank you. Yeah.
Madam First Partner, I'm going to cheat.
Yep.
Because I'm wearing two hats today. As a commissioner, I would say our partnership with you around pay equity and putting that issue front and center, and hoping that as we build these new businesses, as Ms. Glover talked about, that they all take the equal pay pledge. So we won't have another generation that in 10, 20, 30 years, we won't still be having this conversation about Black women earning pennies to the dollar. With my state policymaker hat on, I will also acknowledge that this isn't a particularly political space, so watch how I navigate this. I'm going to say the one thing I think we must do is vote. And we have the opportunity here in California to vote in November to reverse Prop 209, which had a disproportionate impact on women and Black women in contracting and educational attainment. And so to reverse 209, to restore voting rights for parolees, so voting rights to regain our power in terms of being a strong presence in electing people who represent us, who will then bring forward policy solutions that meet our individual needs. And reparations. In California, we have the opportunity to at least study the concept, talk about what reparations could look like in California to close that multi-generational wealth gap, to acknowledge the fact that this country was built on our backs, and what we must do as a country to allow Black people to play catch up. That's what I would suggest that we must do in one word: vote.
Vote. Thank you. No, I love it. Well, we have a little more time that I'm going to open it up to some audience questions. So from Lisa Fitch, can you please speak on the Black women's experience on getting out the vote historically and what we must do in November?
We have to make sure that Black voters are disenfranchised. You know, quite frankly, the Democratic Party knows that it's the consistency of the Black woman's vote that helps guide the party. We know that nationally. And so what we have to do is listen to Black women who are leading organizations in states where we know voters are being disenfranchised. And so stepping up to the plate to make sure that everyone has access. You know, this year, 2020, is the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment. And yet it's the 55th anniversary of the 1965 Voting Rights Act, when Black women truly fundamentally got the right. And while we have had the right for less time, we consistently show up to make sure that we cast our votes in a block, quite frankly, in a voting block, to meet the needs of our communities and, quite frankly, our children and our future. And so it's just making sure that we are not our vote is not taken for granted by candidates or either political party. I think that's critically important.
I could add just a little bit to that. I agree with everything that was said. And so many Black women and other women of color are employed in service jobs, in not-for-profit jobs. And we've been made to believe that we can't touch anything that is political. We can talk about the importance of voting. It is not breaking the laws of a 501c3 to encourage people to vote. You're not telling them who to vote for. You're just encouraging them to vote. It's part of our democratic right and obligation. And so think about wherever you are coming in contact with people, to encourage people to vote.
That's great. Yep. Stacy, feel free to jump in here if you want to jump in on any of these. This might be interesting for you, Stacy.
Yeah, well, if you run a company, you can give people the and for a lot of people a long time given COVID and the social distancing rules that are out there. So giving people the space and the time to do it. And we need young people to volunteer at the polls, because typically older people volunteer and many of them feel unsafe or maybe immunocompromised. And so if you are a younger person or you know a lot of young people, please encourage them to sign up to volunteer at the polls.
That's actually a great idea for something we could do with California volunteers this fall. I love that idea. Thank you. That's a great idea. From Tamara Houston, what are your thoughts regarding implicit bias when it comes to systemic disqualification based upon ethnic names?
You going to
answer?
Yeah.
Ms. Glover, somebody take it. You all gonna make me really act out, and I don't want to act out today.
I want to see you act out. You take this one and I'll back you up.
Act out.
You know, we carry so much. We carry so much. And I'll take it back to hair.
Yeah.
And you know, and quite frankly, first partner, I have to tell you, these are the kinds of conversations we sometimes have, you know, among family, because we have to unpack the years of oppression that we carry. Everything from hair and hair texture to colorism to ethnic names, and how sometimes we aren't our best selves as Black women in terms of passing judgment on others. But we've seen the studies. We've seen the studies, the blind studies where the application goes forward with an ethnic sounding name and another application goes forward with Holly listed, and who gets the call back and who gets the job offer. We know that exists. And so I think it's a part of our responsibility to continue to push culture change.
Yeah.
The whole piece about the Crown Act was to not degrade my sisters who choose to wear their hair straight, but it was about saying that a Eurocentric notion of what's acceptable in terms of hairstyle in the workplace and school is no longer appropriate. I think the same goes with names. A Eurocentric standard of a name, of what makes the hiring supervisor comfortable, a name that they are either familiar with or can pronounce, is not acceptable. And so a part of our culture shift is helping the world understand that we present in such a way that is uniquely ours, and we should have the right to do so, fundamentally.
Holly, are you suggesting people do put race on their resumes when they apply for a job?
I'm sorry?
Are you suggesting that job applicants put their race on their resumes? Does that help?
No, I'm not suggesting that at all. I'm suggesting that if my name is an ethnic name, that shouldn't be a barrier to my hiring.
So I agree with you, but we're encouraging employers to diversify. And yet, how do they do that? There are questions they're not allowed to ask. So how do they diversify
just let him finish the question. I'll do it. Thanks.
I was going to respond in a way that actually relates to that comment, because what we have to do is we have to change the system so that people who are hiring are aggressively looking for people of color. They're aggressively looking for people with disabilities. They're aggressively seeking out all of the things that make for the diversity that creates a stronger company, a stronger organization, that it is not enough to penalize would-be employers for the discrimination. We have to get to a point where they don't get to stay there if they're not diversifying their staff. They don't get promoted if they are not leaders who understand how to both hire and to bring out the assets of people who are different. So rather than thinking about trying to hide a name that is clearly Hmong or Latinx or clearly a Black name, because people will just go from the name to the zip code that they don't want to hire if all they're just trying to do is to figure out a way to get around the rules. What we want people to do is push those rules away and create the ways to affirmatively go after what they need for their companies and their businesses to thrive. And that is to bring in the authenticity that is the nation, that is the state, that is what's needed. What could be more valuable in a global economy than to be connected to the globe through language, through kinship, through custom, through comfort? They need this. And so we need to move away from the incrementalism of don't do this, don't do that, to you don't stay here and thrive if you're not showing that you know how to build diversity and get the best out of it.
And you cast this broad net, and as you said, if you have a broad perspective in terms of who's doing the hiring, they don't need race on an application to be able to understand the beautiful diversity in a set of applications.
One last question from Dejanay Shaw. What can everybody on this thread do to create change in closing the pay gap? What are tangible steps that people can take on this from the Zoom chat to actually close the pay gap in their workforce, et cetera?
Well, we just talked about the hiring process, which is, it's not just about hiring at the entry levels, but it's also hiring at the executive levels. And we set targets for everything. I run a why can't we target diversity? Of course we can. And so if we're trying to close the pay gap, look at the data. Have you evaluated yet what is the pay gap between people in your company? Have you looked at it by race and by gender separately? Because often as two groups, Black women, we get grouped into one or the other, and then we're further behind, and that's why. So separate those things, look at it by race and by gender, and evaluate it and make the changes. Do that evaluation on a regular basis. Track your promotions. What percentage of Black women are being promoted? What percentage are not being promoted, and why? And have an understanding around it. Those are two very tactical things that we do today, and many companies can do.
That's great.
And I would just add that, and Senator Mitchell will certainly talk about the things that we can do in the policy arena. So I'm going to leave that to her. I want to talk about what we can do personally, because we actually contribute to the pay gap when we're taking a new job and you get offered a salary and you don't push back. When we don't start demanding salary increases that are comparable to what men are expecting. If you have any control over contracting out from your company to for others, make sure that you look at some data about what are they paying, so that a company can't even compete to get a contract with your company if they have a pay gap. So we need to think about the things we can do personally in terms of stand up for yourself, because when you stand up for yourself, you're standing up for others, but use everything you touch to be able to advance the things that you believe in.
I love that. I love that. Thank you. Holly, do you want to close it?
I would say that there are several people in the chat that are listing bills. Our the Legislative Women's Caucus has addressed this for decades, and our effort around equal pay, our efforts around paid family leave are all critically important. the Women's Caucus Priority Bill several years ago, I don't remember the number or who carried it, unfortunately, that really, you know, created an opportunity where you didn't have to list your last salary in order to apply for the new job. We know we have breaks in service because we have children or whatever the case may be, but you can never catch up if your new salary is always tied to only a 3 or 5% increase to what you made previously. So to no longer be required to list your last highest salary on an application, because that should have no bearing in the value of the work and the new job that you're applying for. I think that's important. And on an individual basis, the commission is partnering with the Commission on the Status of Women and Girls is partnering with the First Partner, and we don't have a trigger date yet, but they're going to be online equal pay trainings that individuals can engage in that will tell you how to advocate for yourself in the workplace with regard to equal pay, understanding the role of the labor commissioner, understanding your rights, and when you think there's been a violation of the law and who to call for help, how to connect with the labor commissioner's office, and how to file a complaint if you need help. So stay tuned to the commission's website and the First Partner's office to talk about rolling out those online trainings to make sure that we all are empowered with the knowledge we need to go fight for what we deserve.
It's true. No, I want to reiterate that I want to thank all of you for your participation in today's conversation and in creating Equal Pay CA. And I really hope if those of you who run companies or you know, currently were working to go back and encourage your company to sign the Equal Pay Pledge, to read it and share it across the board. There are tons of resources there. You can go to gov.ca.gov/equal-pay. But we really do have to lead. California has to lead. It has to lead the nation. And again, we do have the strongest equal pay laws, but we're not always compliant. And we have a lot of work to do here in California to make the strongest laws the smallest gap in the nation. Again, remember, this is just looking at the income gap. This is not looking at the wealth gap. So all of our conversation about reparations and everything else, that's needs to be, those conversations need to be had as well. We really have to address the wealth gap through policy. And so anyway, I don't know, I'm just feeling super energized and super grateful to work with all of you. This was a beautiful conversation. You are 3 powerhouse women. I mean, anyone would be lucky to have you on their corporate board, and that's because I'm also championing women's representation on corporate boards. So for all of you listeners, 3 remarkable women right here, but just dynamic powerhouses, role models to me. I look forward to continuing conversations with you, to partnering with you, to being a, you said it was not an accomplice, not an active ally, an accomplice. I love that language. Thank you, Holly, so much, Senator Holly Mitchell, for that. Angela Glover-Blackwell, always so eloquent. I can't wait for you to come out in our documentary in about a month and a half's time. And you're just, all of you are so eloquent and thoughtful. And Stacy, corporate America is lucky to have you. So God bless you all. Thank you for a wonderful conversation. Keep up the incredible work and leadership. We're in this together, and we're going to get through it together. And like you've inspired me, and I have tremendous hope, and we're just going to keep fighting this fight together. So thank you all so much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, First Partner. Appreciate it.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Much love you. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.